I guess this one goes to the. Oh, okay. So yeah, we'll probably just stand like right here, and we both have. So we've got a clicker, and this is the one to the Zoom. So we're gonna have to, or I guess, what do we do? Because yeah, we got to be somewhat close to this.
Okay.
In order to. Okay. So I think you start.
Okay.
We also have a head.
I don't know. We should just start. But I don't know. Is this a like? Can they hear? Hello.
I hope so.
Maybe they turn it on remotely. I don't know.
Yeah.
She has mine.
Sorry. That's finished.
Oh, okay, all right. We got you. Okay. Push the button until. All right.
That's right.
Push the button, hold it till it turns green.
Yep.
On this.
Yes.
Okay.
What do you want to do? Should work by now. And that's this.
That's interesting. All right. All right, everybody, thank you so much for your time and attention today. Thank you, Blaine, for a wonderful presentation this morning about bee diseases and bee health. We're just going to jump right into it. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Jenna Crowder. I am one of the state apiary inspectors working for the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. And with me is Joey Caputo. And today we're going to give you a brief rundown of all of the bee health issues that we saw in the field and have been dealing with this past year of 2022. How does this?
Yeah, sure. You just that right button. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Registrations. So if we compare the number of registered beekeepers in 2021 to 2022, we can see that there has been an increase in the number of registered beekeepers. A lot of those have been hobbyists. So we are seeing the influx of hobby beekeepers, especially in the Salt Lake Valley. I really like this map because I think it demonstrates not only where the bees are populated, but it's kind of an interesting reflection of human populations in the state of Utah as well. So here we can see where these apiaries are located. We also have this map located in the back of the room in a poster format for your perusing pleasure later on today. A brief note about registration and the new online registration system. Same with last year, we are transitioning from this old registration system to a new online database. And what this means is that we now have two databases of registrations that are not talking to each other. So if you're going on to the old system and you see that your license is showing as expired, but you already paid the renewal, that means that you are currently up to date in the new system. If you have any issues with renewals or with renewing your registration, this is the number you're going to want to contact. Our registration specialist is Dana Hardy, and she will walk you through the online beekeeper registration process. I'll leave this up just for a couple extra seconds in case somebody wants to snag a photo of that contact info. All right, moving right along. Joey, you want to tell us about all the inspections that have taken place this year?
So as far as the work that Jen and I did, this on the left, we did 140 inspections, 669 hives, and you can see the county breakdown there.
Our county inspectors, we want to thank, especially thank the ones that are here, Blaine Nay, Michael Stevenson, and Dean Hannibal. This is the work they did. So an additional 230 inspections and about 1,300 hives in 10 counties. If you don't see your county up there and you want it to be up there, you gotta give us a holler. We really want this program to be meaningful to every single beekeeper in the state. But it is kind of one of those things where the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So give us a call, send us an email if you want us to come out. All right, we're happy to do it. And in fact, we like going out to other parts of the state, not just sticking with the Wasatch Front. So you'll see we've got a little graph here, and this represents the darker the fluid is, the more inspections that were done, or the more hives were inspected, we should say. And then the lighter blue is the fewer number of hives that were inspected. And you'll notice a whole lot of counties in the southeast, we just didn't get any calls. So if you want us to come out, like I say, please give us a holler. This was not a great year for foul brood. So here's a couple different maps. The yellow, or I'm sorry, the red dot is American foul brood. The green triangle is European foul brood, and then the yellow diamond is where we have American and European found in the same hive. And we've found cases here in Emory, Grand County, so the Green River area. A whole lot along the Wasatch Front, and then Blaine and our old King County inspector found some down south, which I should mention. Rob Brinkerhoff has retired from the position. So, okay, we have 76 hives total that were found with American foul brood, 58 with European foul brood, 186 with parasitic mite syndrome, 82 with shockbird. Another bad year for mites. And I'll hand this over to Jenna because she does all the lab stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about a breakdown of disease occurrence by year. So if we look at this year, the rates of diseases that we have seen, American foul brood, European foul brood, co-infections of both of those diseases, chalk brood and parasitic mite syndrome, you will see that across the board, we are seeing an increase in these diseases across the state. The gray bars on this graph represent 2021 data, and the red bars represent 2022 data. So not only are we seeing an increase in American foul brood, just as a disclaimer, a lot of the American foul brood hives that we detected this year were detected in extraneous circumstances that were very quickly mitigated. I'll get into that in a little bit here. But we still are seeing an increase of American foul brood throughout the state. So always be vigilant, be looking for those signs of American foul brood that Blaine mentioned earlier today, that roviness, that foul smell, the sunken cappings. We also are seeing an increase in parasitic mite syndrome. Again, be vigilant about your mite treatments, be rotating your treatments. If your initial treatment does not work, you might want to hit that hive again with a different active ingredient, because there are many strains of mites that may be resistant to a particular chemical. So always rotate your treatments and keep those mites under control. Here we can see a breakdown of chalk brood cases throughout the month. We had a big spike in July, which is interesting. And then as the season progresses, it sort of drops off, and we have no more chalk brood in the September and October timeframe. I'll pass this along to Joey to explain this graph.
So this just hopefully gives you some context about the American foul brood levels that we're seeing in relation to previous years. So, and yeah, with that line that just went up, that was in 2017 when the FDA put into effect the veterinary feed directive, basically putting the antibiotics under veterinary supervision. And we think this is playing a big role in the increased levels of foul brood that we are seeing. So as you can see, before that year was basically below 1% of colonies inspected. That's kind of what we like to see. And since that time, it's been above that rate. And unfortunately, the trend has been that it seems to be climbing. So this red line is basically the percentage of hives found with American foul brood from our inspections, and then the blue line is the number of colonies that were inspected. I don't want to sound the alarm though, because as Jenna will explain, some of these foul brood cases were kind of extraordinary circumstances and were dealt with really quickly. So I don't think there's any reason to panic, but it is something that we should all be really paying attention to as beekeepers and trying to do our best to keep this under control. And Jenna can talk more about this because she was more involved in it.
Yeah, so this is one of those extraneous circumstances that we were talking about with American foul brood. So I'll give you sort of an anecdote of something that happened earlier this year, which led to a lot of American foul brood detections, or a lot of hives that we confirmed were positive for American foul brood. So it all started when I got a call from a beekeeper saying, hey, I purchased some hives from an out-of-state seller. This is used equipment. I just want to make sure that these hives are clean. So he sent in some samples and we ran a foul brood test to make sure that there was no risk of American foul brood in this equipment. Unfortunately, the vast majority of those samples did test positive for American foul brood, which was the alarm bell for us of, all right, we need to shut down this situation and make sure that these hives are not going to have anything installed into them, right? So thankfully, the seller of that equipment was equally as shocked to hear the news. He refunded the buyer and the hives were transported back to the state of origin, where I've been in contact with their Department of Agriculture. Those hives have been completely destroyed as of September of 2022. So sort of a cautionary tale of, if you're purchasing used equipment, which first of all, avoid that if you can. If you must, you are always welcome to send in a sample to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food Apiary laboratory, and we will get that tested for foul brood to alleviate any concerns and make sure that you're putting your bees into healthy equipment. All right, so Varroa, this is a much more common problem, right? Much more of a cosmopolitan pest in American foul brood. So we are, throughout this year, we saw sort of the traditional standard Varroa curve of low Varroa levels early on in the season. And then as the season progresses and we get into August, September, October, that's when we see those sort of Varroa levels start to naturally rise. So of course, the data that we collected through our inspections mirrors sort of the natural Varroa life cycle. In response to high Varroa levels, we sent out a Varroa treatment reminder postcard to a majority of registered beekeepers throughout the state. Unfortunately, due to constrictions in accessing our contracted print shop supplier, we weren't able to send out a postcard to every single registered beekeeper this year. So we prioritized Salt Lake County and most other areas of the state. The county that we did not send postcards to this year was Utah County, because we had been sending out so many American foul brood outbreak alert letters that there had already been a lot of communications from us in Utah County. All right, just a friendly reminder that we do also do the National Honeybee Survey. This is a big part of what we do with the apiary program. So this is a nationwide survey that is monitoring across the country for various diseases, viruses, pesticide levels. They do nosema tests, they do foul brood tests, and all of this data is sort of pooled into a open source online portal where you can view this data and see a breakdown of where our state ranks compared to other states. The way that the survey works is we would come out to an apiary that has more than 8 hives, take a sample of live bees, take a sample of dead bees, put them in alcohol, and do a brood pump. One of the really cool benefits of this, of participating in this survey, is that you get a report at the end that breaks down where your hives fall in relation to all of the other samples that they are analyzing at the lab that does this analysis. So the breakdown will say, oh, you're in the 90th percentile, hopefully not the 90th percentile of Varroa, but it'll put you in a relative rank compared to all of the other samples, which I think is very interesting. One of the really important things they screen for in this survey is varroa mite, of course, invasive genetics from other honeybee lineages, but most importantly, they also screen for the presence of the tropholaylax mite. I want to take a couple minutes just to talk about the trophy mite because it is something that we do not have here in the United States, but it is on the horizon. The tropholaylax mite is a very small parasitic mite. You can see in this second image here, it's the mite on the left. So it's much smaller than a varroa mite. It's much faster than a varroa mite. And unlike the varroa mite, it does not have a phoretic phase. So you know how when we do mite checks, we're taking a sample of adult bees, doing a sugar shake, or doing an alcohol wash to check for the number of adult mites that are on the adult bees. That check does not work for tropholaylax mites because the trophy mites will never be on an adult bee just hanging out. They are constantly in the brood, constantly reproducing, and they have a much faster reproductive cycle because of that. They're all, like I said, they're very difficult to detect using our traditional mite detection methods. And the symptoms of a trophy mite infection very much mirror the symptoms of a parasitic mite syndrome situation or a standard varroa mite infestation. So having the ability to take samples, send them to an out-of-state lab and where they do this really intensive genetic screening for this invasive mite will allow us to detect if and when trophy mite does ever come into Utah. Currently, again, this mite is not present in the United States, but if it ever does come, we're trying to avoid a repeat of the introduction of varroa and be prepared ahead of time. I have a question, yes.
They have protocol as far as treatment.
So that is actually an active area of research. Right now, the most promising treatment is formic acid. So if you want to see the results of the National Honeybee Survey and all the years that we participated in it in the past, those are available at this following link, research.beinformed.org/state reports. Just to give you a quick breakdown, we can see that nosema levels. Here, the blue bars are Utah's statistics, and then the black line is the national average. So we are consistently below average in terms of nosema, which is good news. Molecular pathogen prevalence, we are a little bit higher than the national average for most molecular pathogens, and I chalk that up to having more varroa mites than in most other states. And you'll see if I go back to this first one that Utah is this dark blue, this sort of purple color, because this map is reflecting just varroa, right? So of course, with an increased varroa, we'll see increases in viral pathogens. One interesting thing to note is that this year was the first year that we detected Moku virus in a sample from Utah. Now, Moku virus is related to slow bee paralysis virus, but interestingly, Moku virus does not have any known negative health effects on bees. It doesn't seem to really do anything negative. It just is a virus that hangs out in the bee ecosystem. But because it is so closely related to slow bee paralysis virus, this is sort of an exemplary sort of situation of these viruses can be introduced, and we should always be, again, vigilant about varroa control to try to prevent the introduction of these novel viral pathogens. Finally, in terms of pesticide levels, and this is from bee bread samples of 2021, the most significant pesticides that were found were 2,4-DMPF and thymol. Thymol, of course, makes sense because we're probably using it in our hives as a mite treatment, right? The 2,4-DMPF, Joey, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's a breakdown product of amitraz, which is another mite control product, something that we would expect to see in a hive. So nothing too scary, nothing too noteworthy there. In terms of lab testings, we have actually increased the number of lab test samples that we've done. This past year, we tested 211 swab samples for foul brood. A lot of those were relating to these American foul brood outbreak cases. You can see here that 60 of those samples tested positive for American foul brood. Actually, 76 tested positive because that 16 on top is also a co-infection with European foul brood. Here we can see that what's 16 plus 42 is 58 tested positive for European foul brood, and again 16 with that co-infection American fowl brood. All right, I'll pass it back along to Joey.
So we did a number of trainings and outreach for our managed pollinator protection plan, which is meant to try to educate pesticide applicators and beekeepers on ways we can cooperate so that we can reduce pesticide exposure to bees. So we did a total of 4 trainings of 4 different organizations. Summit County, Wasatch County were the first 2. And in those cases, we were working with their weed abatement department. Now, weed abatement departments use herbicides, and herbicides have far less acute toxicity than insecticides. However, the science is showing us that there can be sublethal effects with the active ingredients used in herbicides, as well as some of the surfactants that are used in these products. And so we really appreciated the opportunity to talk with these folks about these concerns and educating them on how they can make their applications in a way that really reduces how much these products will end up in beehives. We also trained 2 private pesticide application companies, Herman & Sons and Thorn. And these are companies that apply both herbicides, but do a lot of insecticide use. So we did trainings on kind of both, the importance of handling, especially the insecticides with care, and trying to work with beekeepers where possible. And we also restarted our pesticide use best practices poster. We were only able to get Cal Ranch stores to cooperate this year. So in the past, we have done Home Depot, IFA, Tractor Supply, but Cal Ranch was the only one that would respond to our calls and emails. And so if anybody has an in at IFA, we would love to get these posters up there again, as well as any other retailers you can think of. It basically just tells the people that are buying pesticides, because it's put in the pesticide aisle, 3 easy ways they can reduce pesticide exposure to bees. And it has a little leaflet on there for them that they can take with them. So we hope that this really gets people thinking about these things when they actually go out to buy the product. And we'd like to get them in as many stores as possible. It's also worth noting that the State Department of Agriculture is in the process of eradicating a Japanese beetle population that's been detected along the Wasatch Front. And this eradication does require treatment of lawns. And so we want to make sure that the State Department of Ag is practicing what they preach and doing the very best in pollinator protection standards. The first part of that is basically every beekeeper within 2 miles of areas that were treated received these letters, basically explain what was going on, what product was being applied, the safety of the product in relation to bees, and what they could do if they wanted to take extra measures. You want to advance it. So the places that we did the notifications were in Davis County. And if you look at the light green, those are areas of turf that were treated. And then the blue dots are where we have registered beekeepers. And so all these folks should have received our notifications. Basically just, like I said, explains what they were using or what we're using, which is acelepryn. Acelepryn has very low acute toxicity to bees, and it was picked for that reason. We picked it instead of using other insecticides that are more toxic. And we were using a liquid formulation, which is less hazardous than some other ones. But nonetheless, we wanted to let beekeepers know what was going on, and if they didn't find the precautions we were taking sufficient enough, then they could cover their hives, and we offered screening material for free of charge if they wanted that. If you want to advance that, these are the beekeepers we notified in Weber County. Okay, and we did a bunch of outreach last year. I did the Honey Harvest Festival as well as the Cache County Beekeepers Association, and Jenna did a ton of outreach. I'll let her tell you about that.
Oh my God, yeah, we did a ton of research this year, or research, not outreach. We did a ton of outreach this year, over 15 different events. Of course, in addition to doing some of the Thriving Hives classes, we of course did our standard presentations for the various local beekeepers associations. Some other standouts were myself and my colleague Sarah, who some of you may know, she helps me out in the lab. We did a table at the Hope on the Hill Veterans event up at the Capitol in, I believe that was in May of 2022. That was really fun. And then we also did a table at Bug Fest at the Natural History Museum in Utah in July of 2022. That one was really cool because we had the whole observation hive, and the kids that were coming through were just really enamored with it. It turned into like a photo op spot for all the families coming through with their kids to stand next to the observation hive. Big thank you to Joey for donating his bees for that observation hive. It was just a blast and a really great opportunity to educate non-beekeepers about the important work that that we do, and also the important work that beekeepers do to support food security. That will conclude our presentation for today. Of course, please take note, we have moved officially, it finally happened. Our new address is in Taylorsville. It is, if you ever need to stop by in person to drop off a sample to me for some reason, it is the small blue building on the right-hand side of the parking lot. All of our sample submission forms and various accoutrements should be updated with our new mailing address, so please make note of that. Do not try to send things to the Redwood building because it will not go anywhere. Of course, our contact information and the department's socials. Are there any questions before we cede the time?
Speak, or would you be able to speak? Have we made any progress on these veterinary fee directives and relationship with veterinarians? I mean, it seems beneficial, especially considering European fowl brood, but it's pretty cumbersome. And you know, the idea of okay, you have one hive test positive, you get a call a vet or make an arrangement or something. I mean, are we making any progress? Because nobody seems to talk too much about it.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the question was, has there been any progress made in the realm of building relationships with veterinarians and making it easier for y'all to access antibiotics, especially in relation to European fowl brood? All right. So you are absolutely right. It is very difficult to get veterinarians to work with beekeepers, and our efforts we have been trying to get more vets involved and on our list of vets who are willing to work with beekeepers. We have done some outreach with the Utah Medical and Veterinary Association. I actually did give some talks there at their conference. And you know, in those rooms, it's a lot of interest from these veterinarians. I invite them out into the field with me, and then it's kind of crickets. We're doing our best here, and it's just gonna keep going up down the path of reaching out to these vets, trying to get more names on that list, trying to get a wider array of people located throughout the state who are willing to work with y'all. We're doing our best. Yes.
Let's say Joey comes to my house and looks at my hive and says, "Oh, you've got European fowl brood." How sure is it that he got it right versus the lab? And if he gets it right 99% of the time, can he write a prescription for, you know, for the medicine to do it? Or can the state establish something where you have official badges like prescription, you know, blah, 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 take it in and get the product?
Joe, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So first of all, our lab results are highly accurate. So we use the quantitative PCR, which Jenna does all that. And so we really feel like we have the gold standard with lab testing. And so the bee inspector usually doesn't call it right there in the field. We'll, you know, let the lab decide that. But to your point of, could we just write a prescription for you? The idea was tossed around, and it is not acceptable under Food and Drug Administration standards. So this is the problem: is they call all the shots. We basically are working within the rules that they've created, But we have tossed around the idea of, could a bee inspector write a prescription? Could our state veterinarian write a prescription because they're a veterinarian? Because we don't have a veterinary client patient relationship. The answer is no. They have shut down these ideas. And my understanding is they're aware that this has created a lot of problems, but I don't know that they're really taking the steps that would be helpful in mitigating some of these problems.
Would we call to, let's call them maybe to motivate them to be more proactive about it?
Yeah, so the question was, who do you call to help? I mean, I would suggest first reaching out to your national beekeeping organizations, because this is a national issue. So American Beekeeping Federation, American Honey Producers Association. I think those are both two good institutions that can help you with this.
This is a national organization that's got to be lobbied, not the state, right?
Yeah, I mean, the FDA is aware of our concerns with it. I mean, we've sent letters to them, and so they understand our position, but basically we're just left to work with the rules they have. But I would say your trade associations would be probably the best way. But I would also not rule out just reaching out to FDA directly and saying, hey, I'm a beekeeper. This is the situation I've been found with. This is the difficulties I'm having. What can you do to help me? And oftentimes it's individuals just coming to somebody with a problem that sometimes gets them to do better work. But so those would be my suggestions.
Legislators, senators, legislators, those guys, can they have the impact?
I would think so. I mean, for sure. I mean, basically, the senators and the state representative or the legislators that go to Washington, DC, they have oversight over these regulatory bodies. So I would assume that reaching out to them could be helpful.
You have a list anywhere of veterinarians in the area that you.
Yeah, so the question was, do we have a list of veterinarians that work with beekeepers? We do, but I don't know how updated it is.
I keep it as updated as I can. But yes, there is a list.
Where is it?
So that is on the Apiary program webpage. If you the Google search terms to get you there will be if you Google Utah Apiary program, and then under the tab for American fowl brood, there should be a link that says click here to find a veterinarian.
And maybe we can have Blaine put that up during lunch or something as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like an American operator, I can say a commercial operation. Maybe find it 5 or 10 miles. What are you going to do? Are you going to just pull of 5 or 10 hectares? Are you going to make that destroy everything? And then are you going to follow up? What do you do like for the next season or to make sure that there's no potential infections?
So the question was, in a commercial operation, what happens if you, for instance, find 5 hives that have American fowl brood, and what does the department require of that, and how do they mitigate that, and what is the follow-up? It depends. So Utah is not a mandatory destruction state. So if you go to like Florida, if you have fowl brood, you have to destroy the hive. That is not the case in Utah. So if the hive could be saved with antibiotics or theoretically other therapeutics, then that is an acceptable course of action. Now, we do want to make sure that that does get taken care of. So there's follow-up communications involved with that. But it all depends on an individual situation.
But we know, I mean, from Wayne's presentation this morning, antibiotics are not going to work. It's, like infecting the spores. And so you're probably just going to allow them, the infection to smolder there for the next several seasons. Is there anything that can be done? I mean, I have an operation that's less than a mile from an operation had to be infected last year. And I don't really know what I can do. And it doesn't seem like there's been really any recourse. Except for a few hives that were destroyed, I still see a lot of open feeding going on down the road. And I just wonder if the state has any more authority that they can kind of mandate good practice when it's been started.
Okay, yeah, so the comment was, and I'm just repeating it so people online can hear. That some caliber was found and there's concern that it's not being dealt with properly. And as Blaine noted, that antibiotics are suppressing the disease, not treating it. And what I'd say about that is you all wrote the B law. So treatment as an option is because I don't know when that was written into the law, but the beekeepers, at least as of recently, have been responsible for writing what's in the B law. I will say if the hive is not able to be saved through antibiotics or other therapeutics, then yes, it needs to be destroyed. And there is, like I say, follow-up to make sure that the disease is not spreading, it's not getting out of control in the operation. But you're right, the spores remain. And so the antibiotics are just suppressing it, and it's not actually curing the issue. So it is something, it's just, we're working with the rules we're given essentially. Yes, no.
Let me respond this way as a commercial beekeeper. If I as a commercial beekeeper run across American Falcon in one of my hives, I burn it. I don't try to treat it, and I don't think there's any commercial people that will not burn their hive. We got too much invested in those hives, not to burn what to do if we find it. Now, it might be different for a hobbyist who has 2 hives with American Falcon, and you only have to burn 1 or 2, that's half your investment. But if I find 200,000 or 300,000, I'm gonna burn it. I take a bit and I burn it. I think most commercial beekeepers that did your job would do the same thing.
So for those listening online, Mel Taylor just made the comment that if he finds American foul brood, he burns the hive, he does not treat it, and believes that that's the best course of action.
May I add on to this? If I may just make a quick addition to this discussion, which I think is a very valid discussion. There's always a difficult line to walk of providing a beekeeper with the options that are open and available to them, whether that be antibiotic treatment or complete destruction of the hives, putting down large hives because they test positive. You know, this is a very tricky tightrope to walk. I will say that in my experiences so far, whenever we do find American foul brood in an apiary, what I'll do is present all of the options to the beekeeper right off the bat of, okay, this is what we found. If it is a live hive, you can apply treatment. What we'll do is I'll come back in 30 days. We will see if that treatment has worked, if there's any subsiding in the infection in the symptoms. If the hive does not respond to treatment, that's when we go down the euthanization route, right? You're absolutely right. One of the tricky things is that antibiotics do not kill the spores, which is why if it's a used equipment situation, if it's a batch of equipment that does not have bees in it, we don't mess around. We do use the power of the state to destroy that equipment if it tests positive and is infected. If there are live bees in it, that's when, well, we can try to go down the route of antibiotics. If that doesn't work, then we can go down the route of euthanization and destruction and sterilization. But it's more from our side, our job is to provide those options and then make sure that the beekeepers are picking one and then following the protocols associated with that option correctly. Yes.
I heard within the last 5 years, I heard about these phages they were studying that I believe fed off of the foul brood.
Mhm.
I don't know, I think it was on the spores, but I'm not sure. Is that still a thing, or is that being, did that come to nothing, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so the question was about the phage treatment for American foul brood. So the phage treatment story is an unfortunate one because it is a really promising treatment. The problem is that it is an expensive thing to produce, and the company that invented and patented these phages just didn't have the capital to get that production up and running. That's my understanding is like Blaine said, they just kind of ran out of money and the project is kind of dead. The technology is out there for anyone who has, you know, again, the couple million of dollars to invest in that, but right now it's sort of in a money pit situation. Yes.
You mentioned that you did some education for private pesticide companies. And I'm wondering, what can we do if in our neighborhood, the neighbor has some pesticide company come and we have die-off in our apiary, and you know, some of the more kind of obvious symptoms of the raised pesticide disease. Yeah, and so I kind of vaguely familiar with what you do if you want to like really pursue it from a sort of a legal point of view. But what can we recommend somebody to you for treatment, or can you make calls to them and say, hey, it looks like you've caused some trouble? What can we do when we know there's a pesticide applicator going through the neighborhood that mustn't be sticking within the regulations, I guess, if they're causing die-off in the neighboring hives?
Yeah. So the question was, what can we do as beekeepers if there is a known pesticide applicator, like coming through a neighborhood, for example, and you know, doing like a trunk mount spray or something in the neighborhood? If there's any associated bee die-off, what is the recourse for that? So I'll start with the legal recourse. Which is, so if you do suspect that your bees have been killed from a pesticide spray in your neighborhood, like if your neighbors hired a pesticide company or something, and then all of a sudden your bees died, the best thing to do would be to contact the pesticides division of the Department of Agriculture, because that company that is spraying, they are subject to a number of laws and regulations that are specifically in place to avoid bee die-off. And if your bees are dying, then there's a risk that that company might be doing something wrong and they need to get cited or be issued a violation or something. But that needs to go through the pesticides department of the Department of Agriculture. In terms of what you can actionably do, if you see a truck coming through that's gonna be spraying, I mean, the best thing to do would be to cover your hives with like a damp sheet for the day, just to prevent the bees from foraging. If it's a contact pesticide, that would prevent them from coming into contact with that chemical. You could also staple some screening to the entrance of the hive to prevent them from foraging for the duration of that day. Joey, any other suggestions?
I just know as well, if you're not wanting to go the regulatory route and, you know, getting your neighbor or whoever in trouble, because a lot of people don't want to do that. If you can find the name of the organization and see if they're open to having a training about this, then that's where Jenna and I can come in. If it's an actual, you know, somebody killed my bees and I want accountability for that, then the pesticide program is your best route. And they usually have us come along with them just because they're not beekeepers. And so we kind of help to walk them through that. But with regards to pesticides, our role is basically education and not regulation.
It's pretty hard to find blame or let's say it's prosecute this, you know, if something happens, is it pretty hard to say, well, how do you tie that down to your hive? Is that pretty hard to do?
The question is it hard to tie somebody killing bees to the person? And I mean, I think it depends on who you're talking to, but I would say yes. And the reason is it's almost like having somebody come into your house and steal something. You have to have a suspect of who did this. And if you don't, it makes it really difficult for the pesticide inspectors to figure out who that might be. And most of the time that I've had people call me, they have no idea. And so it makes it difficult, I think, to be able to figure out who it is.
Well, but even if you saw a pesticide approved going out to your neighborhood, your hive guys, just because they're in proximity, does that make them the culprit? I mean, it could be somebody else spraying their yard that wasn't even involved with those guys. How do they make that connection? Or how can you make that connection? And that's
Yeah, so the question is, how do you even make a connection? You know, somebody's coming down the road and they're spraying something and then bees die, how do you even make that? So if you do have an idea of who it might be, then the pesticide inspectors will basically collect the bees and they will test it. And they will find out if there's any chemicals on the bees. If there's chemicals on the bees, then they are going to do an audit on the applicator. And by state law, you are required when you're commercially applying pesticides to keep records. So if they don't keep records, that's a violation and they're going to get in trouble for that. If they are keeping records and it turns out that that was the pesticide that was found on the bees, then that's how they make that connection.
Say the pesticide department of the Department of Ag that does the testing of the bees.
That's right. Yeah. So if you Google UDAF and pesticide program, that will take you directly to their website. And we actually should probably just provide their phone number up here, but we didn't do that. But yeah, just Google UDAF and pesticides, and that will connect you to the program that investigates these things. Yes.
I have people anecdotally all the time blaming the mosquito abatement operations in the state for their iodine. And my understanding, you know, that they mainly spray at night, they're not supposed to, bees aren't out to protect it. Is there any validity to that? Do they, because I have also heard when they start having West Nile virus cases, that they start applying it a lot harder and longer. Not putting the envelope as far as not keeping time, just trying to get it as much out there as possible. Is that a concern? Is that you had a lot of problems with that, or what's your experience there?
Well, we've definitely had people in the past report that, and it's a case by case thing. And so in certain circumstances, it may turn out to be that. In certain circumstances, it may not. I don't know that we can. I'm not able to definitively say, oh yes, you know, it's definitely a big problem. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so for mosquito abatement tactics, I'll tell you right now, the majority of the chemicals that they use are specifically designed to be very ephemeral. These are chemicals that, like you said, they're applied at dusk when the bees are not going to be flying, and these chemicals don't stick around very long. I'm talking, they dissipate in a matter of hours when exposed to air, right? So first of all, the chemicals that they're using are not going to be the most harmful things. But it's also tricky because each county has their own mosquito abatement district. So it can vary depending on what county you're in. The aerial applications like the planes, the crop dusting planes that come through in the Salt Lake Valley and spray for mosquitoes in the salt marsh area, those are going to be spraying a very low toxicity chemical for bees. Some of the other mosquito abatement districts will be spraying on truck mounted situations, and those do have a greater risk of being exposed to the bees because it's at that ground level. But the mosquito abatement organizations are pesticide applicators in their own right, and so they too are subject to those laws of requiring records retention, and they're subject to audits. We also internally, we provide each mosquito abatement organization with the known locations of apiaries throughout the state so that they know where the bees are and that whether they should or should not be spraying in a particular area. I would say if you have a concern about mosquito abatement in your area, the best thing to do would be to contact that local mosquito abatement authority and just let them know, hey, I'm a beekeeper. I'm concerned about my bees and please don't spray near me. And they will certainly oblige. Yes.
Like I said earlier, I started keeping bees back in the 60s when they were spraying mosquitoes with DDT. And every week there'd be a county truck driving down my street, fogging the neighborhood with DDT. And my bees are over there 50 feet away, and I never had any trouble because they're doing it in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's with DDT. So I'm not worried about pesticides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
I just have a question going back to our route. I know some other states, especially in the Northwest,
have access to irradiation treatments for beekeepers? Is that anything that we have access to here in Utah or West Coast that you know of?
Currently, no. That is not something that we offer. But I think it's a great idea. It is. The thing is, it's expensive. That's the tricky bit. Yeah.
And
Well-
it costs $130 per pound, so it's not super expensive, especially if you have a lot.
Just a startup.
Well, the startup of it, yeah.
Last question, the state spent a lot of money on tracking the African killer bee, a few years ago. And we know that you found it in Washington County and Kane County, and did we ever find out if it entered, San Juan County? They are in San Juan County,
Yes.
Yes,
and, you're not spending any money tracking them at this point,
No, we are.
we are still tracking, yes.
you're still tracking.
Yes, we are doing regular sampling of the counties that border known counties with,
Say whether you found anything.
we haven't found anything novel since 2017. Yeah, right now, all of the Africanized honeybee seems to be localized in the bottom part of the state. I can't remember off the top of my head what the counties are. Do you know off the top of your head?
San Juan, okay.
Emory, Grand, San Juan, Garfield, Washington, Kane, Iron, and I think that's it.
Did Emory end up with an African bee?
Yes, yeah, Emory County does. Yeah, and if you're ever concerned about that, we can collect bees to test. So we still monitor for that. We just don't report on it because we have too much to report on that it's actually happening versus stuff that it's not happening. But thanks for the question. Oh, that's a good one.
Is it a growing problem in those counties?
The question is it a growing problem in those counties? I don't think so. I mean, we basically, whenever we find it, our goal is not to get rid of it, eradicate it. It's not possible. The Africanized honeybee is not an invasive pest. It's an invasive set of genes, and you're very hard pressed to remove invasive genes. So what we try to do is educate the county and local governments on, best practices for dealing with bees if they're ever called as a first response issue. But we just don't really see that many stinging incidences involving Africanized honeybee. Though when we do, it usually is a big deal. Someone ends up in the hospital or worse, and it gets a lot of media attention. Lunchtime? Yeah.
It is lunchtime. I think it's set up outside. We want to thank Joey and Jenna for their participation. They are fantastic resources. They've always been willing. And we're just lucky to have them. We really appreciate it. So enjoy lunch. We're next scheduled to reconvene 1 o'clock.
Thanks, Mark.
Your job, if you like. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Wayne. Can we get these lines up here?
Okay, yeah. I've been told that there's still lots of sandwiches out here. Help yourself to those. If you're running low on water, there's a drawer at the bottom of the cabinet over here with lots of water in it. So help yourself to those. On the checkout counter out here, you saw a half sheet that looks like this. There's a young lady at the University of Utah. Her senior project is writing up a history of beekeeping in Utah. And I'd sure like to see that. And she's looking for input. So if you know about anything about the history, join her email there. If you have personal experiences you want to share with the world, she'd appreciate the help. Now, once again, you're getting a 4-H lesson here.
Sorry.
They get a workbook. It's about a quarter of an inch thick. Kind of like it has some instruction and questions and checklists for examining the hive and so on. And after a year of working on this workbook, I consider them to be experienced beekeepers, and I expect them to help me teach things each month. And I give them a certificate that says that we're in Iron County, so the certificate says Iron Beekeeper. So kind of a neat thing for the kids. And I asked them for